Good evening, everyone. For those of you just joining us, I'm Adam Goodhart, Director of the Starr Center at Washington College, coming to you live from the historic Custom House in Chestertown. And I'd like to welcome you to this special event, the special event in our weekly series, Thursdays with the Starr Center. Tonight's program with Stanley Nelson is sponsored by the Crossing Cultures Lecture Series, which brings to Washington College distinguished scholars, artists, activists, and others to talk about human journeys across boundaries of geography, identity, and politics. Mr. Nelson's film Freedom Riders certainly speaks powerfully to that theme. It's about a movement that's based literally on movement, and about a social revolution affected by people banding together across racial lines, bravely crossing over into spaces from which they had long been debarred. That revolution eventually led to other migrations that would remake the South and reshape American politics. I'd like to give special thanks to the founders and funders of this important series, Stan and Liz Sellett, who are with us this evening. Stan himself is actually a veteran of the 1960s civil rights movement. He was an early Corps organizer and an organizer of the 1963 March on Washington. All of us at the Starr Center are honored to know Stan and Liz. As part of this program, you're going to actually see some rare footage of the Freedom Riders right here in Chestertown, Maryland in 1962, footage that was recently digitized and archived through the Starr Center's Chesapeake Heartland African American Humanities Project. Big thanks from all of us to Leslie Raymond for sharing this film, which was shot by the late Van Conway of Washington College's class of 1960. We're so pleased that Van's son Carl is with us in the audience today. Carl, we're so grateful for your dad's work, both as an activist and preservationist, which we're really happy to share. Finally, we hope that all of you tuning in tonight will join us next Thursday for a conversation with another special guest, MSNBC's Steve Kornacki, who will join us for a conversation about the roots of America's current political divisions. And we hope he'll also talk about his own unexpected rise to iconic cultural status during the week after the presidential election of 2020. And now my Starr Center colleague, Jasmine Castro, the digital historian and archivist for the Chesapeake Heartland Project, will introduce tonight's guest of honor and tonight's moderator.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. It is my great pleasure to introduce our moderator and distinguished guest for tonight's discussion and Q&A. Our moderator is Carmel Curtis, an archivist in the Moving Image Archive of Indiana University, Bloomington. She received her MA from NYU's Moving Image Archiving and Preservation program in 2015 and currently serves as a board member of the nonprofit Screen Slate, a daily resource for independent repertory and gallery screenings in New York City. She is also a proud but distant member of Transfer Collective, a volunteer-run group that works to increase community access to at-risk audiovisual media. Our distinguished guest speaker is acclaimed filmmaker Stanley Nelson, who is today's leading documentarian of the African American experience. His films combine compelling narratives and rich historical detail to shine new light on the underexplored American past. Awards received over the course of his career include a MacArthur Genius Fellowship, 5 Primetime Emmy Awards, and Lifetime Achievement Awards for the Emmys and the International Documentary Association. In 2013, Nelson received the National Medal in the Humanities from President Obama. In 2019, his film Miles Davis, Birth of the Cool, was nominated by the Grammys for the Best Music Film. Nelson's latest documentary, Crack Cocaine, Conspiracy, and Corruption, debuted on Netflix in 2021. In 2000, Mr. Nelson and his wife, Marcia Smith, co-founded Firelight Media, a nonprofit production company dedicated to advancing contemporary social justice issues, amplifying underrepresented narratives, and fostering a new generation of diverse filmmakers. I want to also mention that during the conversation, we will be joined by Reverend Robert Brown Jr., who is a native of Chestertown, Maryland, and represents the 4th generation of pastors from his family to serve in the Baltimore district of the AME Church. He is the pastor of Bethel AME in Chestertown, Maryland, and Vice President of the Chester Valley Ministers Association. He will be speaking a bit about Chestertown's own past with Freedom Rider protests back in 1962. Our moderator and Mr. Nelson will first discuss the film, and then we'll open it up to your thoughts and questions. Please post your questions for Mr. Nelson in the YouTube or Facebook chat. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Carmel Curtis and director Stanley Nelson.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jasmine, and everyone for being here. Thank you so much, Stanley, for joining us, and really excited that we have already such an active comments going from people just watching the film already. So just a little quick intro on how this is going to work today. So Stanley and I are going to talk a little bit first. I'm hoping that it's going to be more of a conversation in general, which is, always a little tricky virtually, but we'll see how it goes. So we'll talk a little bit first, and then really grateful to be able to be joined here with Reverend Brown and the audience as well. So throughout this time that we're talking, please feel free to type in questions that we can present to Stanley and to Reverend Brown, but also really feel free to share your own stories and experiences in the comments, and maybe some of those will be incorporated into the conversation. But as Jasmine said, I'm an archivist, and a lot of my questions and lines of thinking come from being an archivist. So even if we don't get an opportunity to share those stories from your comments in this conversation today, this is being recorded, so this will be documented, and who knows where that will take us in the future. So stories is actually really where I want to start with you, Stanley. In preparation for this meeting tonight, I've been watching some of your past Q&As, and I've been, fortunate to attend some of them live in the past myself too. And I often hear you talking about the stories that you hear and you tell and you share from the protagonists in your documentaries, and particularly in Freedom Riders, the stories that this range of people tell, either that you're interviewing directly or these stories that come through these archival documents, are really a grounding and a rooting aspect of your documentaries in general, but in particular this film. So I hope that this isn't too personal a question, and if it is, just say pass. But I'm really wondering if we can start with your own story, if we can start with just some of your own roots. I'm curious what the environment that you grew up in was like. I'm curious what your upbringing was. What kind of environment did you grow up in that cultivated you to be a filmmaker that could make a film like Freedom Riders, or to live the life that you're living now? If you could just take us back to your own roots, and if we could start there.
Sure. I grew up in New York City, in Manhattan, in Harlem, and my father was a dentist, and my mother was a librarian, who actually, gave up working for a good period of time because there were 4 kids, but then she went back to being a librarian after we kind of got a little bit grown. But, my mother was a librarian. My mother, we always had to have a library card. We always had to have a book, she'd like, okay, like, what book are you reading? And if you didn't have a book, then she would send you to the library to go get one. So, tried to make sure that we kept a book around, so we didn't have to, run out to the library. But that's how I grew up. I guess it was fairly upper middle class, especially for African Americans, because my father was a dentist. And I was going to college, and I was just bumming around college, and I really had no focus. I didn't know what I wanted to study. Like so many people in college. I mean, I think that so many times, young people are just encouraged. They're like, okay, you got to have a path. I didn't have a path. It was kind of during the Vietnam War, and I knew that I didn't want to go to Vietnam. I knew that I wanted So I wanted to stay in school. So I just took, a bunch of different classes, and I kind of wandered into a film class. And, I had shown no, aptitude for anything artistic. But I went, to the film class, and I liked it, And so I took some more film classes and then changed my major to film, and then graduated with a degree in film production.
Thanks for sharing that. I grew up in New York City also, and am the child of 2 New York City public school teachers. So I always had to have a book around also. Thanks for just setting that foundation. It's helpful for me to hear, and hopefully some of our audience members too, just to get a sense of where you come from. So moving into Freedom Riders, if you can talk a little bit about, so your body of work covers so many aspects of Black American experiences, of Black social justice experiences, whether that's from Emmett Till to Miles Davis to Madam C.J. Walker to the Freedom Riders. Can you talk a little bit about, since the focus of our film tonight, of our discussion tonight is Freedom Riders, and I'm hoping that everybody here has had a chance to view it already, but if you haven't, just shout out that you can still view it on PBS for free. But can you talk a little bit about what your connection to the Freedom Riders was? What aspect of Freedom Riders within the larger civil rights movement, what about the Freedom Riders within this larger civil rights movement spoke to you as a subject for this documentary?
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to have to adjust the light a little bit. We're losing the light outside. It was great.
Always directing.
It was great light outside until just a few minutes. So I have to adjust. So I had done a couple of films for American Experience, the show, the PBS's main history show. We first did Marcus Garvey, Look for Me in the Whirlwind, and then we did The Murder of Emmett Till. And so we had a relationship with them, and they actually came to us. Both of those subjects, Marcus Garvey and Emmett Till, we had suggested to them, and films that we wanted to do, and they came to us with Freedom Riders and with the book Freedom Riders, written by Ray Arsenault. And if you got that book, it's like
700 pages, yeah.
It's like huge, and they brought it to us, and I did not know the Freedom Riders story. I mean, I guess I had seen Eyes on the Prize, and I kind of seen the story, but I didn't really know it. And I remember when we first got in production, we had to have we had a map and a timeline, because we were like, okay, now. First, they went to Tennessee, and then they went to, and then when did they go to Anniston? We couldn't. It was really hard, for a while to kind of just figure it out and to make it into kind of a film, Mm-hmm. So it was very, the beginning was kind of struggling. We really struggled with the story, and trying to make it, kind of a story, and that was in some ways one of the biggest challenges in making the film, is to try to lead from one thing to the other, so that it wasn't a series of them getting beat up, or disasters, that it was really leading to something. But we figured it out.
Yeah, definitely. This leading to something. This process of building and leading to something, and this movement, this literal movement, as Adam pointed out in the introduction, I think is something that, to me at least, it seems like the process by which you made this documentary seems in ways to mirror the processes of the Freedom Riders. This building to something, this collaboration, this fortification and strength. I'm wondering do you see was the process of making Freedom Riders was it at all inspired, or did it at all draw inspiration from the Freedom Riders themselves, the process of making this? Do you see a parallel there at all?
I mean, after the fact, maybe. While we were in it, we were just trying to struggle through it. I mean, So I mean, to get a better idea, to be more concrete. So the Freedom Riders started out in D.C. and they went through the Upper South, and the Upper South is Tennessee, South Carolina, and another place was North Carolina, the Upper South, and they had an incident, for example, in South Carolina, right, and they were kind of chased out of town. They got out to, I don't know, go to the bathroom or something, get some snacks, and they were chased out of town. We spent a lot of time with that. I mean, this is the kind of thing that filmmakers do, right? So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out, how we tell that story. Do we have to tell that story?
Mm-hmm.
Were we not being true to the Freedom Rider story if we cut the story? And finally, we decided that no, we just got to cut the story because we can't have them face something in South Carolina, face something in North Carolina, face something in and then finally it takes away from the story that in Alabama where they confronted real violence, mm-hmm. and something really happened, so that one of the things we had to think about in telling the story was, okay, what was the result of what happens? You know what I mean? So in South
mm-hmm.
Carolina, they get off the bus and they get harassed and they get back on the bus and flee and keep going. But in Anniston, the bus gets set on fire and they get hospitalized and have to turn back. So a lot of times, we spend a lot of time as filmmakers, kind of angsting over stuff that in the end, hopefully, it doesn't really affect the story.
Yeah, as an archivist, those are questions that we deal with a lot. Also, what gets archived, but what doesn't. That question of what gets included in your documentary and potentially what gets excluded.
I think one of the things that's changed that now it would be a 6-part series, and every single stop along the way would be covered.
All right, call Netflix back up.
Yeah, but
5 more parts.
You might be bored to death, but
Well, I think that's also something that seems to be prevalent in this documentary, in particular, is that is how engaging it is. And I've heard you talk before about the use of this in classrooms and in educational settings, and that it isn't at all. It's the furthest from boring you could get. Do you still see people programming this a lot, and have you seen an increase of that with some of the movements that are happening now?
To tell you the truth, I don't really know. I mean, when I'm asked to speak and stuff like that, then I know. But people can just rent the film or arrange to show the film from PBS. So
mm-hmm.
to be honest, I just don't know. But I think that one of the things that we wanted it to do was to be a roller coaster ride and to be an adventure story. My kids. I have twins. I have a 32-year-old daughter, but twins who are now 22 or so, and they were around 10, when the film came out, and we really wanted the film to be something that they could watch and that they would be engaged in, and I felt really great when their middle school that they were going to. At that point, programmed it, and had me come and speak. People, the young people really seem to like it. So we want. I mean, it is an adventure story, and these films, I think, aren't valuable, unless they're entertaining, and unless they hold an audience. I mean, that's the dirty little secret, that. You can make a film, but if nobody watches it, it's not valuable. So And I think that that was the story. You know, I mean, I watched the end of it just now while it was on, and you know, it's just an incredible story. You know, it really is, and so many things, you know, happened during the making of the film. You know, kind of lucky, just you know, all those lucky breaks that you get, you know, in making a film. You know, you know, and I forget, you know, sometimes. So when I see it, it's weird because you don't people don't think about the fact that like I might not see a film that I made for a couple of years, you know.
Right.
And then when I see it, I'm like, whoa, you know, I can't even believe that I made it. It's hard to explain. It's like a disconnect, you know, that, oh my God, I made that. You know, but so that one of the things, you know, that song that's in the film, you know, Hallelujah, I'm Traveling. You know, we found that song, and it was actually written. I forgot. I think it was one of the Freedom Riders or one of the people that wrote it, and the only version we could find, you know, he was singing it. He was like singing it very operatically, you know, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. It was like it just didn't work, and
I think that works.
we got a singer, you know, to sing it, and you know, we had used her for something else before, and she's a really great singer, but you know, she did a version, and you know, it was kind of, you know, she was doing too much, you know, she sounded like a singer, right? She just sounded like, you know, a singer. And you know, I told her, well, you know, like say it like you're riding on one of the buses, you know, you're on a bus, and you're just and you know, you're a Freedom Rider, and you're just leaving DC, you know, and you're sitting there and your head's next to the window, and you're just, you know, hallelujah, and she just nailed it, you know, and it's you know,
yeah, it's a really beautiful, powerful song, how she sings it especially.
Yeah. I mean, just, you know, so that's just one of the little things that just kind of came together and work. You know, so many times, you know, when you have an idea and when you're making a film, you have an idea and it doesn't work. You know, like you know, you think of an idea, you know, at 10 o'clock at night, and then you do it and it doesn't work. But, I think it's really important that that as a filmmaker, you give yourself the freedom to have dumb ideas, you know, and that you're working with people, you know, who you can be free to have dumb ideas around.
Yeah.
And the Lorenz Grant, who was the producer, and Louis Erskine and Algernon Tunsil, who were the two editors, I had worked with, you know, for a long time, you know, and I didn't have to be nervous about being an idiot. You know?
Yeah, that feeling comfortable around your collaborators is a real privilege. Any recent dumb ideas that you want to share?
Of ideas
of dumb ideas, failure ideas.
No. I mean, I'm really good at forgetting, you know.
There you go.
My failures. You know, I mean, really, you know, people always ask, you know, in screenings when we used to have screenings, you know, the people would always ask, you know, so what did you leave on the cutting room floor? And I'd be like, I don't know, you know,
it's on the floor. You don't remember.
I left it on the cutting room floor. You know, I'm like, I just forget it, and maybe it's because, you know, for my own sanity, so that I don't sit around and think about, you know, damn, I should have put that shot in. Oh my God, I should have left that out. You know, I'm like, and I literally don't remember, you know, so don't ask me about what's on the cutting.
Yeah, that's probably for the best then. We're starting to get in some questions from the audience, but before we go there, I want to take a slight pause and take this opportunity to bring in our community guest, if he's ready for that. Great, nice to meet you, Reverend Robert Brown, who's the grandson of Reverend Frederick G. Jones Sr., pastor of Bethel AME in Chestertown. I always want to say Chesterton. Sorry, Chestertown, Maryland, that provided a space for protesters during freedom rides in '62. So Reverend Brown, I know you're just joining us and are getting technologically situated. There you are, we can see you. Can you see us and hear us okay? Reverend Brown?
Guess not.
We're still getting situated there, I guess. We'll bring him back in a moment. Our fantastic tech people behind the scenes, I'm sure, are working to get that settled. So then let's switch back gears, I guess, and we'll take some questions from the audience that have already come in, Stanley, if that's okay with you. So we have a question from Colin Levy, I hope I'm saying your name right, about the film, and they're asking about how difficult was it to interview Governor Patterson, as he appears to still be so unapologetically racist, or at the very least condoning of what he did at the time during the Freedom Riders. I imagine this is a question you get quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, that was the strangest interview in some ways, because he was the governor of Alabama, and he was actually thought of in Alabama lore as kind of a liberal governor, because he beat George Wallace in '58 for the governorship, and so he became governor, and then that was when reportedly George Wallace said, I'll never be out niggered again, and George Wallace then came back as like the racist that we all know and love, and so so in some ways Patterson is thought of as kind of an okay guy there. I think that that in some ways I would disagree. I think that what Patterson was trying to do was do I'm not sure what the religious term is, like penance or something, where he was trying to confess. He was trying to confess, because he knew he had done wrong. I mean, he was, his father, I think, had been something like Attorney General of Alabama, or so it wasn't like he was like some backwoods, country boy. I mean, he had traveled, he had been to the north, but he felt like that was what he had to do to be elected. A matter of fact, we did a little kind of add-on, to the film. What are all those things where you on the DVDs?
Special feature
thing, and we did a little thing with him, and he actually said in the feature, I knew better, but wow. I just wanted to get reelected, and I ended up losing anyway. But it was the strangest day, because we went to, he was in Alabama, and we go to his house, and the crew is largely African American, and the Asian sound woman, and we go to his house, and he does that Southern gentleman thing where we have to sit down in the dining room and eat lunch and everything, and Obama had just been elected for the first term, okay, and Patterson is a Democrat, so he was like ecstatic about Democrats taking the White House. I mean, and so it was just a weird day. To interview him, I kind of go into like like a different mode, and I'm just trying to interview him, and when he started saying some of the things he said, I was like, yes, whoa,
that's good footage.
Oh, yeah, that's great, and when he lied to Kennedy, he tells his secretary to tell Kennedy that he's not there, right? He's trying to avoid saying it. I was like, wait. So Mr. Patterson, what you're saying is you lied to the president.
You lied to the president.
He was like, yeah. I was like, oh, well, would you say that, please? Because I'm going to ask you again. So I said, so tell me what you did when the president called. He's like, I lied. I just lied. I was like, good.
Yeah, that's such a powerful moment in the documentary to get that confession, and whether or not, whatever that means, for the individual audience members or for the history of the movement, but the behind the scenes complicity in trying to prevent so many Black movements throughout history is, so many of which are still coming to light and are still repeated. It's important to have the documentation of the full story, or as much of the full story as we can get. Another question from the audience for you, Stanley. A question about if your work with PBS was your first paid film work, or were there smaller projects that you worked on before or after school? Plenty.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I did a lot of stuff before Marcus Garvey, which was my first film for American Experience. I made after film school, I worked for a guy named William Greaves, who was like the
one and only.
The one and only William Greaves, the dean of African American filmmakers, and he had a company making documentary films, and I started working with him and for him. I actually lived with his family up in the woods of upstate New York, and so I started working with him, and I did sound for his films. I started as an assistant editor, then I became an editor and edited some of his films, and then I did a film, $2 and a Dream, about Madam C.J. Walker, which was my first independent film, and which I produced, directed, wrote, did the sound, researched, everything. We had, it was like no money, and that was that. So that was my first feature-length film. I actually worked for a number of years for an organization called United Methodist Communications, which was the communications branch of the Methodist Church, and it was great in my formation, because we would just make films. Like we didn't have to raise money. They'd say, okay, go make a film about this church, go make a film about that. Whatever they were. And so we would just go and make films, and so. And I learned a lot there, because I learned that the United Methodists are just just like everybody else. I mean, when they see a film, they want to be entertained. They don't want to be bored. And so I had to figure out how not to bore people.
That's kind of a good segue. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about Firelight Media. And the importance, or what you see as the importance of creating a space like this, where I listen to you talking right now about this freedom that you felt when you didn't have to worry about when you were doing it all yourself and you didn't necessarily have to worry about money. Mm-hmm. And is that part of what? If you can give the audience a little bit of background about Firelight, and wondering if that was part of the inspiration in creating a group like this.
Yeah, so our company is called Firelight Media. That I think in the intro, my wife Marsha Smith and I founded 20 years ago or so, and then maybe 10, 11 years ago we split off. So there's Firelight Films, which is the production company. And it's kind of a for-profit company that produces films, and then there's Firelight Media, and the flagship program in Firelight Media is the documentary lab, and that's been going on for 11 years. We have over 100 graduates from the documentary lab, and what we do is we work with filmmakers of color all over the country. To help them produce and finish, their films, either their first or second film, we've had incredible success with filmmakers. We've been able to find great filmmakers all over the country, We've won, I think, every award except an Academy Award, so we're still working on that. But filmmakers have won every, Sundance Awards and Emmys and DuPonts and all those good things. It's going strong, and we try to just mentor people, and hire other filmmakers to mentor people and help them get through and help them make films. One of the things that's really amazing is that the people who have gone through the lab and have finished films stay connected, and they will start working with each other, and they have a listserv, and today they were looking for somebody's like, I got to shoot in Arizona, Tucson, Arizona. Does anybody know any camera people around Tucson, or sound people, or accountants, or graphic design? They really have been connected, and it's just been something that cause us so much gratitude to see people making films and just be on their way.
And if there are any young or any age filmmakers who are watching in the audience tonight, there's gnats flying around. They're going through the screen. If there's any filmmakers, particularly filmmakers of color, who are in the audience with us tonight, who are interested in getting connected to work of Firelight, what is that process like?
Our website is firelightmedia.org, and you go on the website, and we also have a robust internship program, very competitive internship program, where we take classes of interns and they work on films that we're doing, and it's been a great experience. I mean, some people have gone, believe it or not, I mean, they've gone from interns to producers.
Believe it.
Yeah, the editing intern on Miles Davis, he was like just the biggest success story ever, because he started out as an editing intern. He was in school at NYU, and he was an intern, and then the assistant editor was pregnant, and she had to leave to have the baby. So then he became the assistant. So then he became the assistant editor, and then he finally got an editing credit as an editor on one film. So we went from an intern to an editor on one film. But he's special. I mean, he was good.
Sometimes it just goes that way. This network of connections, I think, is really powerful and beautiful and important to expanding the range of voices in documentary cinema or just in media in general. If we can bring it back to Freedom Writers for a moment, and if you can talk about the team of people who you collaborated with on this project, and I guess I'm particularly interested in the process of gathering all of this archival footage. If you can talk about what that was like, who you were working with, how did you get all this amazing newspaper footage, video, some of the moving image footage of the buses burning, of the giving the glasses of water. It's really, how did you find all of this?
Yeah, first I want to say, how sorry I am that the community member.
I know. I hope it's not too late.
But maybe technology will.
Reverend Brown, we're hoping.
Technology gods will shine on us, and he'll get on. I mean, one of the things that we've done a number of historical films. So one of the things we do is start looking from day one, for footage, for anything we can find, and we make what's called a wish list. We say, obviously anything on the Freedom Riders, but and then we might name all the Freedom Riders, anything, and we just. And we have an archivist, an archival researcher, and she was just like, all day, every day. That's her job for like a year and a half. To just find footage, and find skills. We were helped greatly by Ray Arsenault, who wrote the book Freedom Riders. So you know, we could say, well, we want an article, you know, that said that they were hospitalized in Anniston. He's like, okay, you know, I'll get you know, I get some of my tech interns or whatever, you know, on this, and so he was really incredibly helpful. But you know, we were really lucky. You know, I'll tell you one story. You know, the lengths that we go to find footage. So when the bus was burned in Anniston, outside Anniston,
Yeah.
the FBI actually had hearings, right? You know that they had hearings, and they had documents, you know, transcripts of the hearings. So I was reading the transcript, and they interviewed some guy, I can't remember his name, you know, and he said, you know, well, you know, I live down the road, you know, a quarter mile down the road, and when the bus when they started attacking the bus, my son ran out with a Super 8 camera.
Wow.
Because he had I'd given him a Super 8 camera. He ran out and filmed it.
Wow.
You know, and the FBI has taken that film, you know, so the FBI has taken that film. So, you know, we got in contact with the FBI and said, this guy said that, you know, you confiscated his film. Do you know where it is? And the FBI said, well, we don't know what you're talking about. So we said, okay, we're going to fax you, the pages from his testimony where he said that. And so we faxed it to the FBI, and they said, okay, well, we'll get right back to you. And so 6 months later, they called us up and said, okay, well, we found the Super 8 footage. You want it? We said,
yeah, we want it.
So we said, okay, we'll send you a copy. And that's the footage of the bus burning.
Wow.
And then the bus being towed away, the actual Super 8 film of the burnt out bus. And I always thought that one of the things was like, you know, it was like a challenge to the FBI, right? So it was like the FBI can't say, well, we confiscated the footage, but we lost it. You know, it was a matter of pride. Well, if we confiscated it and it's on paper, then we're gonna do everything. And so that was how we found it. The other thing that I was reminded of is the little girl who gave them water.
Yeah.
And you know, that was like the last interview that we did.
Yeah.
And she was out in California now, and I was like, oh God, you know, I don't know if she's gonna, you know, we got to go all the way out to California. I don't know if it's really worth it. You know, we already shot some stuff in California, so we go back. You know, I don't, you know, it doesn't, you know, yeah. And then I said, yeah, you know, let's just shoot her. And, you know, she changes the whole film. I mean, she's just incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. She's incredible to the story. You know, that this little girl would. I'm about to cry, you know.
I know.
Find the humanity, you know, in the midst of that craziness, that somebody, you know, and it's a little girl, you know, does the right.
A little white girl, yeah.
Does the right thing, you know, like just out of the core of her soul, you know. Yeah. Her family actually ended up having to move out of Alabama.
Oh wow!
They moved to California.
Wow, yeah, that part, her story, and then the footage also that you see of, you know, the people with the glasses of water. It all comes together. So
we first saw the film with her. She was like, "Wait, that's my bucket! That's my bucket!" You know?
Yeah, I mean, to be able to recognize yourself also. So we have a lot of questions coming in from the audience, and unfortunately, we weren't able to get tech stuff worked out with Reverend Brown. Hopefully, we can find a way to incorporate his voice or his story through the Starr Center some other way. But we are fortunate to be joined by somebody else, Patrick Nugent, Deputy Director of the Starr Center. Hello, Patrick. Welcome.
Welcome, welcome. Thanks so much, Carmel, for moderating tonight. And Mr. Nelson, it's so wonderful to meet you. And I am kind of impromptu filling in here for Reverend Brown. I wish he could make it, and I hope he's watching. And am really just so excited to kind of introduce the home movie that is rolling right now. Reverend Brown had planned to share his thoughts on this home movie that was just donated to or shared with the Chesapeake Heartland Project. Reverend Brown is the grandson of Frederick Jones, who was the pastor of Bethel AME Church in Chestertown, Maryland, during the time of the Freedom Rider protests here in Chestertown in 1962. So what we're looking at here are protests led by a group of Freedom Riders who came in from Baltimore, Maryland, as well as Philadelphia, Maryland, joining forces with local churches and community members, as well as Washington College student, staff, and faculty. And they're protesting in front of a restaurant known as Bud Hubbard's. And there's Mr. Hubbard, Bud Hubbard right there. He's reading the rights of a property owner to the crowd there. And he infamously also invited his patrons, his white-only patrons, into the restaurant for free beer. He gave out free beer during as kind of a counter protest to the protesters. While this is kind of rolling, I thought, Stanley, something that I've been thinking about, I should say I'm a 20th century historian and have really dug into the Eastern Shore, history of the Eastern Shore in the 20th century. And when I came here, folks kind of began speaking about the Freedom Rider protests that occurred here. And from my understanding from watching your documentary, the Freedom Riders really were moving much further south and kind of really centered on Mississippi and Alabama. I'm wondering if you could speak to, have you ever kind of heard of the way in which the Freedom Riders, kind of as a metaphor, or kind of as a movement that spawned many other movements across the next few years? Can you speak to the way in which kind of that one summer of '61 spread to further places and movements?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was I'm sorry, I'm kind of echoing for some reason. There you go. I think that there were other freedom rides, after the main freedom ride into the Deep South. There was a series of freedom rides along the D.C. New York corridor, because one of the things that pushed it on was that we started getting African diplomats as African freedom movements took hold in the late 50s, early 60s, and they would have to drive from New York, the UN, to DC, and they couldn't stop. And especially you're talking about African diplomats who might not understand what's going on, they were like, wait a minute, I thought this was America. So you had another set of freedom rides, to open up the corridor. And then people forget that so much of Washington and Maryland and other places were segregated. And it was also the will of the shop owner, like this guy in the video, so that one of the things we go into in freedom rides, the Black people never knew what they would have what they might encounter, on the road. I mean, I still remember, when Black folks, packed a cold lunch when they had to take a trip, and a lot of African Americans still do. And kind of don't know the genesis of that, but that was because you couldn't stop.
Yeah, so much more to talk about, and this footage, it's almost difficult to ask you questions because I just want to watch this really incredible home movie footage. That really grateful to the that this is being shared, but want to squeeze in a couple more questions from the audience. And Pat, also feel free to stay on or add anything else. But a question from Adam Goodhart, the director of the Starr Center. What kind of story do you think you might tell if you made a film about current day Black Lives Matter movement, or is it too soon to even think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You know, I'm not really you know, actually doing one or thinking about doing one. I'm sure there's a lot of things that will be done. I guess, you know, one of the things I've always wondered is you know, what would happen if you gathered, you know, all the phone footage that people are shooting all over.
Yes.
Because, you know, every time you see a demonstration, you know, half the people are holding up phones, you know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there must be incredible phone footage of the demonstrations and you know, things that caused the demonstrations, and something maybe that's based on that. I just want to say too, you know, I just want to get this out before we're done, is that we're in the middle of making 2 films.
Yes.
Set in Maryland, one on Frederick Douglass and another one on Harriet Tubman for Maryland Public TV. Where those should be completed somewhere in the summer, and I'm not sure when they're going to air. But
this summer? Wow, that's.
Well, we're going to finish them this summer. I think
yeah.
They probably won't air for. I mean, we've shot, you know, probably 50-60% of it.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to ask another question, and I think Pat's going to jump back on also. But speaking of the current projects that you're working on, I am curious to hear a bit about the project that you're working on about Attica. And I'm thinking about it particularly tonight in light of this conversation about freedom writers and about movement, like physical movement specifically, and the political momentum that can be gathered from the ability to move, which, you know, of course, is the opposite of what prison of confinement is. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about Attica and about that project and just tell us about that project.
Yeah, so we're working on a major feature film on Attica, a documentary film on Attica for Showtime, which will air the week of the 50th anniversary or 50th commemoration of the rebellion at Attica in September. So the Attica lasted from September 9th to September 13th. So we're frantically trying to get the film there. And you know, it looks really good. You know, one of a couple of things, you know, about Attica is that you know, although it was spontaneous, you know, it was also part of, you know, the prison movements at that time. So many of the people who were, you know, involved were reading, you know, Black Panther literature, Young Lords literature, Malcolm X, other things, and so it wasn't just, you know, like completely spontaneous. The film is, you know, I think we're not going to interview any historians. You know, it's all people who are involved in Attica, the inmates who were there, the observers, law enforcement, you know, all news people, all those different people who are together and you know, make the film work. So it's just really exciting. One of the things that you know, people might not know, you know, the Attica Prison Rebellion, when they rebelled, the inmates said that they wanted the media to come in because they felt like the media would protect them, so that if they came in and filmed them, that they would be somewhat protected. So there's incredible footage of Attica, of the inmates, and of the observers and the mediators who trying to mediate a settlement. So we're working on that.
Yeah, really excited for that. I mean, so what you're saying seems like such obvious lines between the, you know, the wanting to call in the media so that it can be documented to the people with their phones out in the protests now, documenting police brutality or just the demonstrations in general. This documentation of whether it's George Floyd being murdered or the riots in Attica, at least give us some proof beyond our own words and memories and experiences.
Yeah, and one of the hardest things about Freedom Riders was that at first, there were only two people on the Freedom Riders with cameras, and one was a cameraman who one of the African American newspapers sent, who was actually a cameraman, and another was one African American journalist who just happened to have a camera and took some pictures. So one of the things that we had to try to do was, and then once they burnt the bus, then the media poured in, and it was tons of media following them. So one of the things that we had to do was kind of balance it. So the film wasn't unbalanced. I was like, wait, there's no pictures and there's no footage. Wait, now all of a sudden there's a lot of footage. So we had to really try to balance that and really work hard to tell the first part of the story before the cameras really came. And one of the cameras is actually in a museum because the camera was completely burnt, melted, when they set the bus on fire. And so it's in a museum now.
Pat, yeah, come on back in.
Great. I know I'm so excited to see not only the Attica documentary, but also the Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. If you ever need a place to stay in Kent County, if you're filming on the Eastern Shore, Kent County would welcome you. And I also feel like as local representative of Kent County, I have to say, if you can squeeze in the story of Henry Highland Garnett or Harriet Shepard or Isaac Mason into either of those documentaries, you'll have a number of fans in Kent County cheering you on and experts able to give you kind of local stories about those three Kent County heroes of the Underground Railroad. I wanted to ask a brief question in part because my wonderful colleague Jasmine Castro has kind of opened my eyes to the archiving of African-American home movies. And as we looked at the home movie that we had showing, as well as just thinking about the ways in which kind of hidden archival footage must play a really important role in your filmmaking, has kind of the digitization of film or kind of the growth in archiving of kind of African-American home movies, has that had an impact on your filmmaking?
Yeah. I mean, I think that look, in any kind of digitizing and collecting of any footage, helps us. And that Mississippi is especially, good at now kind of collecting and documenting their history. So they have a whole Super 8 collection, of home movies, some states, it's so funny because I was just talking about Maryland to somebody today, and I was saying, Maryland is one of those states that's special. There's some states that are special, right? So Mississippi is special. Maryland is special. Maryland's different from every place else. And so that they collect their history. I was just kind of giving the archivist a pep talk, I was saying, like go get it, because part of the film, both films, Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass is about Maryland, and about how, and so maybe we should talk, off mic, but about how, about the difference and how Maryland was special, especially when you think of slave states. It was just very weird, I mean, I don't know what else to say, because like Frederick Douglass, he was still enslaved. He married a free woman. Harriet Tubman was a slave and she married a freeman, at some point, and people worked side by side. So, I mean, you could say that maybe in Mississippi or or Georgia, Alabama, the known world to you was the world of slavery. That was all you knew, and the enslavers tried to keep it that way. so that you couldn't read or write, or you didn't have contact with people from the outside world. But in Maryland, you were working right next to people, and you could literally walk to freedom, like in an afternoon, so it was really a kind of a very different kind of place, and partially that's partially the hopefully some of the story that we're going to tell. But if you have any suggestions, you guys got my email, so anything that can help in terms of Maryland, deep history, because again, Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, really, they're just on the verge of photography.
Thanks so much for that. Yeah, as we wrap up now, somehow we're at 8. I feel like we could keep talking all night. Thank you so much for your time, and want to welcome back in Adam Goodhart, who will wish us all a good night.
Thank you so much, Carmel, for your great moderation, and Stanley for this incredible conversation. And by the way, I'm especially excited that you mentioned the Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass films, because recently I was interviewed for them on camera by your co-director.
I thought that was you. That guy looks just like you gotta put the scarf around you.
Exactly. I was all wrapped up in a scarf, and we did it outside because of COVID. So
no,
I'm the guy who's like, his teeth are chattering as he talks about Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass. I better not end up on the cutting room floor with this.
You're not. We didn't talk about this, but it's part of the extra effort that we have to make to film during COVID.
Yeah.
And I mean, we started, this film and the Attica film when the COVID epidemic was raging and there was no vaccine, and just trying to get stuff and to make it look right, so that 10 years from now they don't say, hey, wait, why does it look like they shot it on a phone? But you're great, so thank you.
It's amazing that you're doing that amidst all those challenges, and all of us in Maryland will be excited. And from what I understand, after it's on Maryland Public Television, it may go over to PBS. We hope it will, because it would be great for those Eastern Shore stories to get that national exposure. So thank you.
Yeah, and seriously, if anybody has suggestions of archives and for pictures and other things,
we'll get in touch with you. I think we will.
Stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and just thank you. It was such a generative conversation and raised all kinds of questions. I think we could keep asking and keep talking all night. So you've really shed so much light on American history. You've shared this film, which is just one of the great American stories in the hands of one of the great American storytellers. So thank you. Thanks to everyone who joined us tonight. We hope that you'll join us again next week with Steve Kornacki, but I can't imagine that he'll be anywhere near living up to the conversation that we had tonight. I hope it'll be a good one, though.
He's gonna be pretty funny.
He'll even bring one of his maps.
Right. So thank you all, Carmel. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you again, Carmel. Good night, everyone.
Good night, peoples.